Okay, Andrew, that phrase value proposition gets used a lot, but the best way to really define it is to ask the question, does the venture deliver tangible benefits to customers? And tangible benefits are ones that you can really touch or in a sense measure very clearly. So these are a bit too small for you to see out there in video land, but we're talking about a money benefit, a time benefit, a quality benefit, client benefit, employee benefits, and all kinds of intangible benefits. But if you can lay your finger on things that matter to people, that they can measure, this is what value propositions are made of. And you gave yourself, interestingly, in this area, Andrew, another 6. Certainly your favourite number. Why was that? When we're asking this question, does the venture deliver tangible benefits to customers?
Sure, we gave ourselves a 6 on this one, just because we only actually ticked out 3 of the 6 boxes here. In saying that, it's probably true that not every organisation will say yes on every box.
Yeah, not everything is designed to save you time. Not everything is designed, even dare one say it, to save you money. So that's a very good point. You don't, and people should realise that with the BEC, it's an aid to judgment, never a substitution for judgment. You know, so you can use what of it that you like to use that's built into the program. And a good example of that previously was with some of those money calculators, etc., and cash flow calculators. A lot of people have got better ones already. So by all means use them. And don't expect that to get a 9 even, you have to be perfect on everything. You could get a 9 for protectable intellectual property without having a patent if you were fast enough and strong enough and quick enough to get to market first and get a first leader advantage that was too massive for people to follow. But meanwhile, back at this point here, tangible benefits to customers. There are quite a few, and I think we've discussed them already. What do you think are the major ones?
I'll run through really briefly. For us, we do bring a significant cost benefit to our customers in that they can have a meeting right now. It's a lot easier without having to fly or drive to somewhere. And shortening production cycle, being able to be on cue all of the time and being able to, instead of create a call to somebody, just walk into an online room and have a conversation in real time, ad hoc. So there's a massive benefit there from a communication perspective. So we think, as far as our product's concerned, we certainly do deliver massive tangible benefits through to the customer in the way that our product user experience works and how that brings a depth of value into the organisations that we're looking at in our target market, which we'll touch on in a moment.
Okay, excellent. All right, well here we are at the value proposition, and the question is the target market well defined? And of course, this is a question pretty much familiar to anybody who's done any marketing at all, but it's really hard to get an accurate definition of people. Now, when we talked, you told me that of all the segments that you could be going after, in the first instance, you're going after companies with employees of roughly 10 to 50 people in it. Why do you think that's the most attractive market segment?
Look, for our product, for our platform, we could suit numerous markets, but as a startup organisation, we have to be really careful not to do that. So we think that as a product, we think that we can have the best effect into that organisation of sort of 11 to 50 people. We think under that, and they probably get more value driving around, or they may not even understand what the benefit is. And we don't have the capacity to train and talk and discuss and sell ourselves.
Right.
And getting higher than that, once we start getting into the large corporates, the multinationals, they could potentially see more value in flying people around, and that becomes us trying to compete with that as a service as well.
Well, I was very impressed when we were talking about how accurate you were in being able to define your first market segment. And I guess for everybody's benefit, whatever your business is, this whole idea of market definition really needs to be done. You can't afford to be hazy, and it may turn out that you have to change your opinion, that really The smaller size firms turn out to be more keen on what you do. But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start with a definition. Would you agree?
I definitely agree. And just to finalise on that, don't get stuck in the point of trying to say our product suits everybody, because that might be the case, but you don't have the capacity to deliver it to everybody day one. Find a really easy market, and if it does suit everybody, you have the flexibility to push out further once your business grows.
All right. There's an old Australian saying, one at a time's good fishing. And when you're starting a new venture, as distinct from evaluating one that's going already with perhaps many market segments, you need to get 1, 2 or 3 market segments well defined and give them a value proposition that matters very specifically to them.
Great.
All right. One of the things you'll notice about BEC, Business Evaluation Calculus, is that many of the issues that it raises are issues that are very familiar to people who've studied business under various headings: finance, marketing, organisational design, corporate strategy, etc. And a key issue is always sustainable competitive advantage, sustainable advantage. One of the things that distinguishes BEC, though, is the order in which the questions are asked and the way they're weighted by an algorithm altogether. So they're never considered in a vacuum, and we'll see that when we get to the report. So at this stage of the game, though, we're concerned with an issue that people understand very well. Sustainable advantage is obviously a desirable possession to have, but the question that gets you there and gets you thinking about it really most trenchantly is this one: has the venture secured exclusive access to rare resources, substantial guaranteed sales contracts, or big league industry alliances? And have you?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is probably no. In that,
that's intriguing.
Yeah, well look, the short answer is we have 2 highly international brands who we have shown our platform to and who have expressed an immediate desire to start using our product through their entire international networks. They're both extremely well-known brands. Anyone will have heard of them, but obviously we're not in a position at the moment to delve into that.
No.
The long answer is no, in that it's not yet a signed relationship. It's a relationship to the point where they're effectively waiting for us to finalise and deliver on our platform, and they will then adopt. We have that in a pretty good fashion at the moment. We're really happy with where that is. And as a startup organisation in the early stages that we're in, it's really comforting to get that kind of feedback, to know that we have 2 very large international organisations that are going to help work with us and build our product and push it through.
That's a big yes for exclusive contracts. And we talked a little bit earlier, although briefly, about your journalistic contact with the opinion shapers in Silicon Valley. So there's partnerships that can boost companies' reputation. You certainly have those. But you're quite candid in saying you don't really command any rare resources. In fact, your whole technology comes from a clever use of a lot of things that are actually inherent in the whole internet infrastructure, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's okay, because, you know, to use a car as an example, a Ferrari has 4 wheels and it has an engine.
Correct.
So does a Mini.
Yep.
One costs $10,000 second-hand in the paper, the other one costs $830,000, and they'll both get you to the shops at the same time because there's a speed limit of 60 kilometres. So as far as a rare resource is concerned, they're both giving you the same, I guess the same value, but that one's giving you a greater quality.
Yep.
So as far as do we have rare resources, I'd say probably not.
No, well you don't, but the short issue is, it's again another example, everyone, that you don't have to tick every box for every business. Clearly, a refrigeration mechanics business can't tick a lot of new technology kind of questions because it's a very well-established technology. However, you might have a lot of competitive advantages in the way that you deliver it, the energy efficiency, the gases that you use, etc. So there we go. And you rated yourself a 7 here.
Sure.
In a nutshell, why?
Look, we rated ourselves a 7 for a couple of reasons. One is because we don't have the rare resources, but more specifically because we do have yes for these first two. I would have put that up to an 8 or even a 9 if we had signed delivery contracts at the moment.
Right, okay.
But we're not in that space just yet. So we've pegged back a little bit because of that.
So you're high-end conservative. All right. Has the venture secured exclusive access to these rare resources, substantial guaranteed sales contracts and big league industry alliances? How important for any business to consider this question?
It's a really good question. I think it's a balance between actually building your business and securing these things, and they have to work hand in hand, sort of lean startup type philosophy, in that you can't spend your entire time trying to secure agreements and not building your business or building your technology. It has to work both ways. So build what you're doing, put it back, get feedback, build it again, get feedback, and when you get it to the right place, the agreements, all these things will come to you, and that's where the value starts to really come to hand.
But you figure you can't start with none.
You can't start with none. You need to start with something, and you need to start with an idea, and you need to go through that cycle of putting it back to market and getting feedback until you get the signature.
Right. Okay, Andrew. The key issue here is ability to execute, and the key question is a very straightforward one. Can the venture team execute on the critical success factors? Now, interestingly, and I'll say this before we talk about yours specifically, you would think that unless you had a team that could do the business, as it were, you wouldn't have a good venture. But it's not necessarily the case. Suppose you had a 9 in every other thing in a new venture you were considering, but you didn't quite have the team that you needed. Obviously, with such an attractive venture, you could go out and get it. So again, this one seems as though it could be a deal breaker altogether, and of course it's much better to have members of the team who can right now be big contributors to the venture. But even this, which seems fundamental, you could have, depending on the other scores that you achieve in other areas, you could be a bit lower than you think. But you weren't. We'll start at the end this time. You gave yourself a 9 here. Why was that?
Simply because myself and the other co-founder, we've actually got a third co-founder as well. We have significant intellectual property assets that we bring to the business that we've garnered over 15 years in the industry. So we have a lot of skill and experience in shipping products and platforms. I've shipped numerous myself, both as an entrepreneur and also working on contracts in past, working for organizations. So I've got a breadth of experience around doing that. So can the venture team execute on the success factors? Just to be really brief, to build a successful organization, you first need to execute on what your product, what your service is that you're doing. That's the first step.
You've got to have the technical capacity to make a cup of coffee if you're a coffee shop.
Correct. And the second part of that of success is once you've done that, and that's not a part of this question, is are you successful? Do you have enough people coming through the door? But first, can you execute? Can you actually put to market what the document, what your pitch deck, what it says that you can do? And for us as an organisation, for me, for my co-founders, the answer is a resounding yes, and we say that based on our previous experiences.
Fantastic. All right, 2 questions to go, and again they're financial ones, making a total of 5 financial questions, 1/3 of the full suite of questions. Clearly they're very tedious, folks, to go into everybody's small detail of a specific venture's finance and so on. Let me tell you that Andrew and his team have really good figures projected for their sales break even and their cash break even, and they're not fully incorporated in the BEC model here, but his numbers don't come from nowhere. They're really based on some good number crunching, etc. But we'll talk fairly generally about these fundamental issues. So sales break even, particularly just in terms of the number of sales that you need to make, that is effectively paying customers who at some kind of a standardised rate are taking you up. And how did you answer this one? Well, you've got some numbers in there that we won't even speak to. Expected sold monthly, etc. They're too specific for the more general lessons here. But you've basically said that yes, you've got a low sales required to break even because of what factors? And this, all things being equal, is very powerful for a business, clearly.
Look, the main factor really is that we are an organisation that runs a product that is software as a service. So we don't have to go and create an engineering part which creates a widget that gets shipped in a truck that comes to us, that we ship to the customer. We're creating technology that people pay a subscription to use. So we've got on here, we want to sell 20,000 units of that, and we only need to sell 8,000 to pay our immediate bills.
Right.
So this isn't month 1, but at about month 9, that's where we anticipate these levels to come into play. So it is really critical to work out what your break even is and to work that out against how much burn is required to get you there. So if you have investment and you have 6 months worth of investment burn, at the end of that, at 7 months, you want to get to a point where you have met your break even based on sales.
Okay, folks, you can't have a business model without knowing what your sales break even is going to be, or having an estimate of that that's reasonably credible based on some form of evidence. So we'll now go to an even more critical area, which is cash break even. All right, for most people who are going to be mentored for an existing or a new venture, we don't have to dwell too much on the importance of cash flow and cash flow break even. So we won't. Folks, we'll get to the point very quickly. And, I guess in this question, is the cash break even point expected to occur within a reasonable time period? That's always going to be a judgment call, and it's always going to be relevant to the market that you're in, the industry you're in, the type of venture you're doing. Extremely long cash flow break even for things like property developments, building physical infrastructure like bridges and roads and things. Extremely short break-even times for things that have got short economic lives like fads or games or something like that. You've determined that 2 years is a reasonable horizon for you to be both cash positive and achieve break-even. And you've given yourself a 6 on the basis of your ability to do that. Why is it so?
We founded this venture in July, and we're now 4 months past that. So we're 4 months into the venture as an appropriately founded corporation. What we're looking at is, for us, we need to go out and develop an online software as a service platform. We need to then feed that into the market, into some specific customers, get an understanding of what they like, what they don't like, go through a process of re-evaluating that, recycling that, and getting it to exactly where we want before we push it out to market proper, which we anticipate within 12 months. So by about the middle of next year, we expect to be absolutely at market. By about March of next year, we want to be with some key customers, learning as much as we can. So what we're talking about here is we think we'll be cash positive by the 2nd year for this venture. And what we're looking at for that is the first 12 months, we then either need to receive investment, seed capital, angel funds, these sorts of things to ensure that we can build our product, build our platform. Getting back before, we are working on an emphasis of taking in small amounts of angel money, but because we have funds elsewhere, we don't need to lean on that as much and spend that and burn as much money.
Okay, so one of the reasons you could be faster if you were seeking more investment sooner, and you've decided not to do that, and that's probably the reason why you've pushed yourself down here. You could achieve a faster cash flow break. You think you've told me when we were working together, folks. Andrew told me he could get a lot more venture capital, etc., than he's seeking, but he wants to manage the equity trajectory, so when he does go to the market, the venture's relatively more advanced. So everybody, this is probably the easiest of all 15 questions for most business people to understand. That you need to work out when cash flow break-even is going to be, and you need to assess whether that's an adequate time frame.
And the most important part of this as well is working out how you feed yourselves, pay the rent and run the bills until cash flow positive comes.
Of course. Okay, now it's time to actually pull all these answers to the 15 questions together, and we'll see how the BEC in its report coagulates and pulls together all of the different and disparate information, and it gives you a really pretty strong insight into the business. So we'll have a look at that now, Andrew. We'll have a look at your very first BEC report. Okay?
I'm really looking forward to it, Kevin. Let's take a look.
Okay. Okay, we're going to actually use a BEC report here. Now, if you don't have the BEC, the Business Evaluation Calculus software, you can still use those two questions, but this gives you a really good overview of how mentoring the transformation from questioning whether there's an opportunity through to coming up with a good business model could be put together. So the first thing in the BEC does is come up with an overall number. It's something like the equivalent of a return on investment or a hurdle rate if you were doing a financial result. It's something that as you get used to using the BEC more and more, the number makes intrinsic sense, so that even if you have businesses in different industries, you can compare, if you like, apples with pears much more easily if they all come down to having just the one number. So it's a mathematical end result of combining everything. I don't want to talk too much about that here because that's not the absolute essence of our mentoring, but let me say that 78% on a first pass is a very, very good result. Now, these sorts of things are easy to understand. The viability factor is a BEC measure of the venture's ability to generate revenue and profit. And of course, all of these things, if you like, the 100% is the perfect venture. So you've got a 72% rating for that. Durability, what do we mean by that? It's a measure of the ability to sustain over time. So we might have something that's a real short venture, it might be a fad, like a yo-yo or something, could have really high profitability, catch on, be very popular for a short time, but only maybe last a couple of months or 3 months. Sure. This happens all the time with things like games and television promotions and things of that nature, you know. But you have quite a good sustainable capacity here with this venture. And your credibility, we could almost use the word scalability there. Some ventures, they might be small consultancy firms that are really good in local regions, but they're never going to challenge McKinsey & Co. But you have pretty good scalability, which is a fantastic capacity, and in a venture like yours, you'd need it, I'd say. You've got the ability to go global, there's no doubt about it, which is a really exciting situation, revealed by asking these 15 questions and considering them weighted together. And when we talk in the BEC, we find that we have 8 different venture types. I'll show you those in a minute, which are standard profiles that describe many ventures. And one of the things the BEC does, it gives you your proximity to the nearest standard type of venture. So you're a niche leader, and ventures of this type are considered to be big fish in small pools. They have a captive or loyal clientele, but that's exactly what you're going for by going for that niche market in the first instance. So this isn't actually telling us all that much because you've almost defined yourself in that way to start with, but you have the capacity, I would say, to go on and be a larger venture.
It's really encouraging though to see this come back on the screen. We've entered all of this information and it's come back with this, which is really, it's almost scary how close it feels to where we sort of think we are.
Yeah, okay. So we've called you Andrew here, which is a bit rude because we're really dealing with corner technologies, but I don't mentor a business, I mentor a person.
Yeah,
and folks, it was Andrew and I working together for his dealing with these 15 issues, which I'm suggesting are the ones that you should use when you're helping anybody, any venturer, with that transformation from the opportunity to whether or not it's going to make a credible business model. So I call him Andrew because that's his name. So a niche leader. You notice on the report here it says ventures of this type are considered big fish in small pools. If we go to any one of these, it will bring up for you and tell you what they are. Probably, obviously the powerhouse is the top right hand corner. And what we've got here are two axes, the durability, how sustainable the venture is, from 0 to 100% of sustainability. Obviously no venture is going to last for 1 million years, but you know, we're talking a 10-year plus horizon basically there. And the viability is how profitable it is, and that profitability is a function of those 5 economic factors that we considered, those 3 questions in module 1 and 2 questions in module 2.
Okay, yep, I remember
So there you are. You're a niche leader, and you're at the moment as you sit, and you'll probably want to move away from that, because on the one hand, really interesting for your venture, and this is where these evaluations and mentoring people is so interesting. You've got great scalability, but normally the biggest problem for a niche leader is scalability. Okay. So that's a really positive thing that I'd take from your venture as your mentor. I'd say, I'm really pleased with that, because it says here, you know, it's sort of said that the proven market acceptance and defendable market share, viability, durability, credibility are factors are well valid. Although that's a powerhouse. Sorry, I want to read the niche leader. Ventures of this type are considered a big fish in a small pond. They have a captive or loyal clientele in their niche markets, regional or otherwise, and when sustained over time, they start to occupy so much space in their small pond, there just isn't enough food for the other fish. However, scalability of the business model represents the biggest challenge. But look up here. You've got fantastic scalability, really. So you can start as a niche leader, but you've got really good hopes of potentially moving your venture from there up into this area where we want to be, the powerhouse.
And we'll modify, we'll continue working through the BEC.
But at the moment, if I let that go, you're going to bounce back to being a niche leader. But you don't start at the top, nobody does.
Nope.
Now, there's no way I'm going to go through this wheel diagram here is actually only feeding back to you. So far, the algorithm hasn't kicked in and weighted them at all, but these are the numbers that you gave. So for argument's sake, let's pick one at random. I'm going to pick the IP protection, and I'll click on it. Rather nicely, it comes around and it tells you the story about what you've done. It says you gave a medium rating for this venture's IP protection capacity, some forms of legal protection, etc., etc. But it's rather nice. And if you go around to talk about other things that you gave, this was one, ability to execute, you gave a 9, and so on and so forth. It's really, and you can view and edit your evaluation here if you wish to do so. There's quite a detailed story there. So it's quite a nice feature of the presentation, I would say. And there's, you can start to see there's a wealth of information here, even in what you've just given. But now we come to something that is perhaps harder, or certainly would be harder for a mentor who's working with people without the aid of the BEC and its algorithms, etc. You have to really think about some recommendations and where we're going forward. With BEC as a tool that we can share, it's done that for you on the basis of all the algorithms, all the research that's gone into it, etc. So let's have a look. The recommendations. First of all, I'll skip to this. This is the notes. This is simply feeding back to you those things that you did under the 5 market headings of product, market, industry, people.
Yep.
And you didn't do many notes, we saw that, and they're only bullet point sort of things. But you can see, as you go through and you work on it, it's working and contributing to your evaluation, not only of this business plan, but of this business model, but later on for the full business plan. And you can cut and paste those outputs into other things. But here's something that is completely unique to the program, and it is the recommendations that come under these viability, durability and credibility headings, and I've never seen two of these the same. So clearly when we're looking at these on screen in a classroom, people getting tired, there's no way we can go through all of them. I just want to pick on it. So it's talking about your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, etc. And it does it under various headings, the headings of the innovation, etc. So let's have a look at your value proposition. You gave a medium rating for this venture's value proposition. Some tangible and quantifiable benefits are offered to the customer. Focus on improving your value proposition. So it's now starting to tell you what you need to do to start improving the venture in this particular area. Revisit your business model and make Revisit your business model and make increases to your client's profitability. Shorten the inventory period, manufacturing process or time to market. Increase the customer's employee. It's starting to tell you a whole lot of things that you could do that would contribute, if they were genuine, not just a falsely putting in a number, the sorts of things that you could do to improve the performance of the venture.
Fantastic. So that goes through and gives us something to really read about, to expand on.
Yeah, well, you've done that and you've talked it over with your team, so I've been talking. So how have you found the BEC process? And look, I'll just do and there's the same occurs in terms of durability and credibility. All of the questions that you've taken on board, the program itself weights them with respect to all of the other criteria, the way you've answered those, to give you some recommendations and some feedback that's coming straight from the program itself. Now, you've done this and you've done your first BEC evaluation, and you have got this report. Admittedly, it's you haven't put a lot of notes or anything into it, but you've put a lot of thought and everything into it. What do you think about this way of evaluating a venture, and how are you a different entrepreneur having undergone this mentoring period than if you hadn't done it?
Look, it's a fantastic tool to really evaluate the venture. I mean, everyone has ideas, but having a tool like this to tell you whether an idea is actually worth executing on is so beneficial for an entrepreneur. It really goes through and it gives guidance as to whether what you've got is something that is market ready, is market needed, and if it's not quite there, it helps to guide you. You can modify, you can edit, you can change things to work out where the substance is and where the value is in your business that you can provide. So it really helps guide you in a lot of ways for what you need to be able to build a great business, and it helps show those weaknesses or shows you areas that you may not have otherwise recognized before this. When I go and put a 6 in, that makes me feel like I have to actually improve that. I've got to make that better. How can I find that value loss that we're not meeting at the moment, and how can I get that from a 6 to an 8 or a 9? So it's been a fantastic tool. I'm pretty happy with the 78% at the moment as an overall for where we are, and I think we'll get that higher and higher as we start to create a much more substantial, valuable organisation.
Well, yeah, and this goes for anybody that's mentoring with or without the BEC. If you use those 15 questions to really challenge, and then you get some recommendations and some thinking out about where the business is. With the program, it's pretty easy. Without it, it's pretty hard. But you could go back and artificially put in a 9 in your lowest area and see whether that changed you from being a niche leader. See how the numbers changed and think. So sometimes different things happen with different ventures. You get quite surprised. Somebody's got a 3 in a given area. Once I can't remember the exact venture. And we just put in a 9 for the hell of it. thinking, oh, this will make a big difference. And it made virtually no difference to the venture, because that meant that criterion, let's say it was IP protection, it might have been somewhere where no business in the world could ever get a patent, and it was all about speed to market, etc. So they would have had low IP protection, even if they could have had high IP protection. In the scale of the nature of the venture and all of the other things that really mattered, IP protection was a low issue for that venture. Whereas for a book or for software or for it's absolutely the highest criterion. You know what I mean?
So it shows
and then in others,
where they need to be better.
yeah, and others you can often see if you can change from a 6 to a 7 in 2 areas, you change the whole nature of the business from being just a job or just a hobby into a niche leader or even better, you know. And so this is really, really important mentoring tool. And so I'd like you to just summarise that for the folks. Where were you when we started? And you know, you thought, I've got a venture, I'm an entrepreneur, I've done it before, I'm there, but you hadn't done these really intensive forcing you to put a number, as it were, in the box for 15 really key issues. And so what's that done for you? How did it change your notion? And I guess that at the same time is a question that says, what's the value of mentoring according to these 15 criteria?
It helps bring credibility to what our beliefs are as an organisation. So things that we thought we were strong in, maybe we weren't. Things that we didn't think we had as much strength in, maybe we do. So it helps bring belief and credibility around different areas of the organisation for us. So it's been massively beneficial to help guide and help build the back end, the business documents, all of these sorts of things. As far as the process from a mentoring standpoint as well, it's a massive impact. You can't underestimate just what an impact this type of gives you as a mentoring process. It brings you into understanding different areas and looking at different spaces that you may not otherwise have taken much notice of. So the whole process has been extremely positive for us, and we're really looking forward to continuing to use the BEC tool and make our organisation better and better as we go.
Okay, so there you go. Well, there we go. We've done, over the last 4 months, when you're such a busy person as yourself, you've managed to find times, you've been around here a few nights, you've talked it over, you've thought about the issues. Haven't done a lot of typing in the notes columns, as we saw, but you've really done an evaluation process involving consideration of those 15 things which research shows are the most important for ensuring business success. And we've managed to get our first report, which has given you, I think, some insights that you certainly didn't have when we began. And so it's been a pleasure working with you so far, and we're going to keep this mentoring role up. I should confess now that I got so interested in the business that I'm actually the first investor in it.
yes, you are, Kevin, which is really fantastic actually, and that's what this whole process is about. It's about going through and making your business strong so that you have as much possibility for success as possible, and also so that you have an investable business for investors and angels, and so that we as an entire community are putting good businesses to market and good opportunities out for investors.
Right. So that's not coming from me, it's coming from him, and there's no doubt about it that you really have to be systematic about the evaluation of opportunity. Most people call an idea an opportunity, look at 2 or 3 things that they're good at, they've had some positive feedback on, and really don't do the hard yards of critical self-evaluation. Andrew and his team have been prepared to do that, and as a mentor you've constantly got to challenge people to do that. And if the process works as it's supposed to, it's always the case that you emerge with a stronger and better business because of the insights that occur. And sometimes, certainly not the case with this venture, which has got a big future, I believe, but with some ventures, the really difficult situation is when you realise, and perhaps the entrepreneur realises that, hey, this isn't such a great opportunity after all. That's a different story. But anyway, it's been great working with you, and I look forward to more of it.
Fantastic. I've really appreciated running through the BEC and running through the results just now. That was really good to see, and 78%, I'm happy with that for a first pass. So thank you, Kevin, for the mentoring, and we'll really work through this.
We will.
Thank you.